Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today. I'm joined today by the great legal team that makes this day possible, and I want to thank them for their work. As you know, yesterday, Judge Parker ruled that the governor's order restricting the enforcement of a mask requirement in Dallas County was unenforceable and overly broad, and therefore it allows us the opportunity to put in place reasonable requirements to protect public safety in this time of unprecedented spread of the Delta variant. When I received word of the judge's ruling, which was after 8 o'clock last night, I began talking to people in various industries. I spoke to the Retailers Association, the Restaurant Association, the Bar Association, Chambers of Commerce, Citizens Councils, and many, many others, as well as public school superintendents, and I will be speaking to more people, including our private school superintendents, later in the day to get their input on this order. Much of the ideas and suggestions that they had have been incorporated. It is so much better when we work together than when we work alone. And I think we've shown throughout this pandemic, at least here in North Texas and particularly in Dallas County with our business community, our schools, and our faith community, that we can not only work together, but we can do that quickly. I want to thank everyone who has been on the phone with me until 1 o'clock this morning, and beginning again at 7 o'clock this morning on Zooms and calls and other Teams meetings, giving me your thoughts and helping us in crafting this order. I've also asked to come and be a part of the signing. I'm going to sign this here in a moment and read it to you. The parents who brought a lawsuit to protect their children that have medical conditions and need to be safe at school, but also need the experience of in-person learning that we want so much for all of our kids. So proud of them, and after I speak, I'm going to ask that one of those moms say a few words as well. So let me now sign this, and I'll read it to you. All right. Let me read you. The order has been signed, and I'm going to read it to you now in pertinent part. I'm going to answer some FAQs that I think you might ask. Then I'm going to turn it over to Jenna Royale and Melissa Griffith. Jenna is a lawyer. Melissa is one of those brave moms, to say a few words, and then I'll take some questions. So I'm going to read it to you in pertinent part. There are some whereases before the pertinent part, but the pertinent part reads as follows. Under the authority of the Texas Government Code, Section 418.108, Dallas County Judge Clay Jenkins orders, number one, effective as of 11:59 p.m. on August 11, 2021, and continuing until rescinded by the Dallas County Judge Clay Jenkins. Roman numeral 1, health and safety policy, pre-K through K through 12 public schools and child care centers. From the date of this executive order, all child care centers and pre-K through 12 public schools operating in Dallas County must develop and implement a health and safety policy. The health and safety policy must require, at a minimum, universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors to child care centers and pre-K through 12 schools, regardless of vaccination status, except for children under the age of 2 years. The health and safety policy required to be developed and implemented by this executive order may also include the implementation of other mitigating measures recommended by the CDC to control and reduce the transmission of COVID-19, such as maintaining at least 3 feet of physical distance between students within classrooms. Roman numeral number 2, health and safety policy, commercial entities. From the date of this executive order, all commercial entities in Dallas County providing goods or services directly to the public must develop and implement a health and safety policy. The health and safety policy must require, at a minimum, universal indoor masking for all employees and visitors to the commercial entity's business premises or other facility. The health and safety policy required to be developed and implemented by this executive order may also include the implementation of other mitigating measures designed to control and reduce the transmission of COVID-19, such as temperature checks or health screening. Commercial entities must post the health and safety policy required by this executive order in a conspicuous location sufficient to provide notice to employees and visitors of all health and safety requirements. Failure to develop and implement the health and safety policy required by this order within 3 calendar days following the effective date may result in a fine not to exceed $1,000 for each violation. Any peace officer or other person with lawful authority is hereby authorized to enforce the provisions of this order in accordance with the authority granted under the Texas Disaster Act of 1975. Roman numeral 3, face coverings required in all Dallas County buildings. From the date of this executive order, all employees, contractors, and visitors when on the premise of a building or offices owned or operated by Dallas County are required to wear a face mask, regardless of vaccination status. Roman numeral number 4, face covering strongly urged within the general public. It is strongly urged that all people 2 years or older wear a face mask in a public indoor setting. No civil or criminal penalty will be imposed on individuals for failure to wear a face mask. Please note that face coverings are secondary to other mitigation efforts. The most important thing, obviously, is that everyone get vaccinated as soon as possible. But face coverings are not a replacement for social distancing, frequent hand washing, or self-isolation when sick. People should follow CDC recommendations for how to wear and take off a face mask. Residents should keep up the following habits while in public: washing hands before you leave home or when you return, staying at least 6 feet away from others, avoiding touching your nose and face, not using disposable masks more than 3 times, and washing reusable cloth masks regularly to prevent the spread of the virus. It is ordered, and I've signed my name there too. Before I turn it over to our other speaker, which she'll speak briefly, and then we'll have an opportunity for you to ask me questions so that several of you don't ask me the same question. I've got some frequently asked questions that I'm facts, I guess, fact sheet, I guess. So I want to kind of go over that, and I'll ask those somewhat, rhetorically. When does this order take effect? The order takes effect today at 11:59 p.m. What entities does the mandatory face mask requirement apply to? The order applies to child care centers, pre-K through 12 public schools, businesses, and Dallas County buildings and facilities. What are schools required to do under the order? All child care facilities and pre-K through 12 public schools must develop a health and safety plan. And this policy must mandate that teachers, staff, students, and visitors wear a mask while on the school's premises. Schools may also include other mitigation measures in their health and safety policy at their own discretion. What are businesses required to do under the order? Businesses are required, that are operating in Dallas County, that is, are required to develop a health and safety policy. And this policy must mandate that all employees or visitors wear a mask while on the property. The businesses may also include other mitigating measures in their health and safety policy at their own discretion. And businesses must post their health and safety plan in a location where employees and visitors can easily see it when they're entering the building or before they enter the building. But before they enter the building. So what steps must a business take to implement the health and safety policy? Well, businesses need to take reasonable steps to require that face masks are worn on their premises, such as posting signage stating that masks are required before people get into the building. Having employees monitor the premises to ensure that people are in fact wearing a mask, and verbally instructing visitors not wearing a mask that it's a requirement on the premises. What is the penalty if a business does not develop or enforce their health and safety policy? In Dallas County, we've worked closely with our businesses. We've yet to have a single instance of someone needing to be fined in our businesses. Well, I take that back. I forgot about a hairdresser. But of most businesses, we've yet to have a single person or business not be able to follow this. This is, by the way, the same policy that Governor Abbott lauded when it was first done in Bexar County 6 months ago. That's the framework that we used 6 months ago or several months ago, what we're using today. Theoretically, if a business refuses to comply, they could be fined. However, businesses won't be fined if they're taking all reasonable steps to enforce their face mask requirements. How does the order apply to residential property? Well, common areas of residential property like apartment buildings or high-rises, such as laundry rooms, mail rooms, gyms, lobbies, elevators, are subject to the face mask requirement included in the order, but individuals are not required to wear a face mask inside their own home or in another individual's home. How does the order apply to Dallas County buildings? We're requiring face masks for people who are 2 years old or older. Well, can individual be penalized for not wearing a face mask in a public space? No civil or criminal penalty will be imposed on individuals for failure to wear a mask under this order. I'll answer more questions in a moment if there are any, but right now I want to turn the screen over to Jenna Royal, who represents 12 parents who brought a suit, and she's going to introduce Melissa Griffin, who's going to talk to us today about her story. And I want to say to those parents, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad that through the work of these great lawyers, we were able to help you. And I'm glad that you were standing up for countless other parents who share your concern. They want to send their kids to school and they want their child to be masked, but they don't want their child to be made fun of or bullied. They want to send their child to school because of their underlying conditions. They need that in-person learning, but they don't want to risk their child's health unnecessarily to do that. Because you've stood up, those who have not filed a lawsuit, not taken money out of their pocket, are benefiting because of your work. And so I want to thank you on behalf of the 2.7 million people who live here in Dallas County for doing that. And I'm going to turn it over now to Attorney Jenna Royal.
Thank you so much, Judge Jenkins. I just want to say thank you on behalf of all of the parents and the students that you are protecting here today with this order. So many parents, myself included, have been fighting for months to ensure that our kids can return to school safely, but it really wasn't until I heard the stories of parents like Melissa and her daughter that I really truly understood the impact of kids being forced to return to school without everyone wearing a mask. I know that everybody wants to hear from Melissa, so I'm not going to speak too long, but I did want to say thank you on behalf of all of us. Melissa, why don't you go ahead and tell them your story?
Great. Thank you, Jenna. My name is Melissa Griffith. And as Jenna said, I am one of the 12 parents who was actually how I feel it was given the opportunity to join in on this lawsuit and advocate not only for my daughter, but I know for just, millions of parents really who were feeling a lot of panic and a lot of uncertainty and fear about this upcoming school year. And Judge Jenkins, I just also wanted to thank you personally for really stepping up and doing what really no one else has been able to do, which is take steps to really help our kids. So my daughter happens to be one of the medically fragile children that's involved in this lawsuit, who is, really thrives in class, but who has some medical issues, who could really be put at risk if she gets COVID. And, but who for virtual learning, it's not right for her. She has an IEP that requires a one-to-one aid. She is profoundly physically disabled, but is cognitively typical. So she's in all gen ed classes. She's going into first grade, but reads at a second grade level, and is really missing her friends, was asking if all of her friends had forgotten about her already, or, were her new friends in class going to be as fun as her friends were last year? This is a child who needs that social interaction, who is really missing that friend-to-friend interaction, definitely that student-teacher interaction. But furthermore, if we were to try to do virtual again, I would literally have to be at her side at all times. She cannot even activate the mute and unmute button on an iPad. So a virtual classroom is just not something that would be possible for us. And I think that she really deserves to have a safe environment to go to school in. And as we saw from last year, masks work. So I think was just kind of the biggest reason for me to really advocate to have masks reintroduced this school year. We had a really successful year last year. Both she and her sister remained safe. And so I think that was just the biggest kind of catalyst for me to really stand up for this. And I know several other parents who are kind of in the same boat where as much as we would like to just kind of maybe step back and do the virtual schooling, that just really isn't a workable thing for us, and let alone all the other parents who really can't make that work, for whether it's their working schedule or things like that. So that's kind of our story, and I'm really excited to be able to send her and really look forward to the start of the school year, rather than kind of have that 50-50 pull and have more of it be fear. So I really appreciate it from a parental standpoint.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and thanks for being a great mom. And we're so glad that this will help your child and other children like her, and all of our children. So we're going to open up for questions, and you can ask a question of me or the lawyers or Melissa. So there's two ways to ask questions. I suppose you can raise your hand, and I already see two hands up, and I'll start with Stephen Dial. If for some reason people don't want to do that, you can put something in this chat box too, and I'll make sure my staff helps me so I don't miss anyone. Stephen, go ahead and ask your question.
Judge, two quick questions. One, did you consult with your fellow commissioners before coming up with this order? I know months ago they kind of limited your role and your executive authority. And then also, how long do you think this will last, seeing as, are you making this order based off of the judge's TRO, or just because you say you found a loophole in the governor's existing order?
So a lot of questions there. Let me try to kind of break them down. So I've got to be very cognizant of the Open Meetings Act and talking to my colleagues in making a decision. And Chapter 418 of the Government Code vests the power to make these emergency orders solely with the county judge. Given the current situation we're in, where one of the commissioners is literally suing me, etc., to remove me from office, I'm doing this under my authority as the emergency management director. I think that was one question. Another question was, under what authority are you doing this, under Judge Parker's order, or are you doing it under some other authority? Well, so I'm doing it under the authority given to me under Chapter 418 of the Government Code. What Judge Parker has done is she has agreed with the arguments of me and my lawyers, and disagreed with the arguments of Governor Abbott and his lawyers. So very briefly, and the lawyers could probably do much more justice to this than I will here, Stephen, but we made arguments that boil down in a nutshell are: the statute gives the governor certain authority, for instance, the authority to suspend or rescind a regulatory statute in furtherance of a response. A regulatory statute, like a Louisiana nurse doesn't have to sit for boards here to help in an emergency. That's one of those regulatory statutes that he rescinded early on in COVID. But stopping mayors and county judges from responding to the emergency in total is not a regulatory statute, nor is it something that the legislature gave him the authority to do. The emergency power was delegated to the legislature over 100 years ago. The legislature set up a framework in 1975 as to who would exercise that. They even came up with a scenario where what happens in a local emergency if the mayor and the county judge disagree. And in that statute, they said, well, the county judge, since the county's bigger, his rulings would control. Absent from that was any discussion of what happens if the governor and the county judge or the mayor disagree about a local matter, because it was never contemplated that the governor would take over and try to macromanage a local emergency. The governor's argument was, well, the judges and the mayors are merely my agent, and under the traditional doctrine of agency, they can only do what I tell them to do. Under a traditional agency doctrine, so if I have an agent, I could theoretically replace my agent, I could fire my agent, I could suspend my agent. Clearly, that is not the tradition in the traditional sense what we have here, when county judges and mayors have the agency of the state authority to react and protect in an emergency. So the judge rejected that argument as well. So both under the authority that existed before the judge ruled and under the authority that is clarified and strengthened by the temporary restraining order, I'm acting. And I may have missed one of your other questions. I hope not, but that's my best at answering them. Next hand up is Steve Pickett. Steve, what do you got?
Judge, I just wanted you to, you touched on this yesterday. Can you explain to the public the initial concern to take this action? What is happening in this county right now regarding the public health that move you in this direction?
Yeah, great question, because we don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is not, parents versus Governor Abbott or Clay Jenkins versus Governor Abbott or the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. This is all of us. We are all team public health, and the enemy is the virus. And right now, the enemy is winning. The enemy has retransformed itself into the Delta variant, where, Steve, when it first began, we had a replication factor called an R0 factor of 2. That means for every person that got sick, they could give it to 2 people. That quickly, with some distancing and hand washing, even before we understood about masks, frankly, that quickly got down into the low ones. But even in the low ones, when you got thousands of people getting sick, and for every 10,000, they're giving it to 12 or 14 or 16,000, it gets out of hand really, really quickly. But with the Delta, when we're seeing those huge surges, we were in the ones, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6. The Delta variant is spreading at an R0 factor of 5.0. So for every person that gets sick, 5 more people are getting sick. That's unprecedented. So you've got this unprecedented spread. The number, if you look at the sheer number of people in the hospital, the sheer number of people who are getting sick every day is not at the all-time high. But also what has happened, Steve, is our hospital staffing situation has deteriorated rapidly and from where we were 9 months ago. The governor pulled the order for temporary staffing while other states continued to lure people to do temporary staffing work. If you recall, for 2 weeks, the governor said, I'm not going to pay for that. You're going to have to get cities to pay for temporary staffing for their hospitals. The effect of all that was the scarce temporary staff that's out there has contracts with other states. And not only that, but the headhunters for those staffing companies were able to go to local hospitals and say, how would you like to make 2 or 3 times what you're making now to stay in a hotel room for a while and work somewhere else? So we've lost a lot of staff. And then finally, what's happened is people are burned out, and there are a lot of people that have taken early retirement. So when we look at our hospitals right now, Steve, what we see is a situation where, although there's not as many people in the hospital as there were at the very, very height of this, we're getting pretty close, unfortunately. We're not quite there yet. We have a lot less beds that are available, because similar to tables in a restaurant, if you don't have staff to take care of things, you can't open the table. So you have a lot less beds that are available because you have a lot less staff. And that's a problem that will now be hopefully getting better now that the governor has reversed course on that and allowed those put those staffing contracts and that pay source back in place. But that'll take time. Now we're trying to buy our hospital some time by doing everything that we all can do to get through this. And the two main things we can do is we can get vaccinated, and then we can wear our mask when we're in public settings. That's what the CDC says will give us our best chance to save some lives right now. Thank you for the question, Steve. Lori Brown is next.
Hey there. So I have two questions. It sounds very likely that the governor is going to be appealing this. What do you expect the Texas Supreme Court to rule? And my second question is about daycares, and I'm just wanting to confirm, it sounds like this is going to be new, that daycares require the masks for kids, because in the past, I don't think that daycares were requiring that for the 2 and up kids.
So the first question, and I don't mean this to be, flippant about that, but if I knew what the Supreme Court would do and I could predict the future, I wouldn't be your county judge. I would be in Vegas living large, right? And I'm not a gambler. So I just don't know. I think what can happen, Lori, and the lawyers could probably speak to that better, but they'll have a variety of appellate maneuvers that they'll take, and we'll just have to see what happens and what the appellate courts do with those. The question of child care centers. So I haven't been able to talk to everyone, but I have been able to talk to all of our public school superintendents or their designees who got on the 8:30 call this morning, and they talked about the importance of protecting kids, all the way down. So my initial, just give you kind of a look behind the curtain. Initially, I said K through 12, and someone said, "What about pre-K?" And so we talked to the doctors about pre-K, and then someone said, "What about childcare?" And so we looked at that as well. And ultimately, of course, this decision falls on me. I'm going to follow the advice of the doctors, but I am informed by those people who spend their lives taking, care of our kids in a school or a child care setting. And so that is, after talking to them, that was the decision made. Thanks for the question. Let me see what other hands are up, and I see a lot of things in this chat box deal. Okay, if I'm not doing it right, I don't see many more hands up. So let me go down through the chat box. Hi, Amy from Eater here. The order requires mask on property. How does that apply to outdoor dining spaces? So this is indoor space, not outdoor space. Kevin Reese, restaurants and bars, what's your specific mask guidance for them? So that the specific mask guidance for restaurants and bars is contained in the order itself. Now that does not apply to when you are eating and drinking. Obviously, if you're wearing your mask inside the building to go to the restroom, to go to your table, and your food gets there, you're drinking a drink or eating an appetizer, you can't do that with a mask on. How does this policy affect high school football practice and games? Well, thus far, this particular policy does not affect outdoor activities, because this policy is limited to indoor activities. and I can't read. Can one of the young people please read Charles Scudder?
I can repeat it if that's easier, Judge.
Oh, okay. Yeah, please, because I can't. The print's for some reason too small for me to see it.
Sure, no problem. So in section 2 of the order, it mentions a potential fine for businesses, but I'm wondering if there's any penalties for the child care centers or schools if they choose not to follow the order.
So the penalties at this point are, and this order is subject to change, but the penalties at this point are limited to the section set out. So there are not penalties for individuals. There are not penalties for schools, but there are penalties for commercial businesses. I believe that our schools will act in accordance with the law. If we find that that is not true, I may have to revisit this. But, that's based on the feedback that I have from everyone. That's what I decided. And let me say this to Charles and everyone. If you remember, and of course there are outliers at everything, but if you remember, we've really worked closely together early on in this pandemic. I had regular meetings with, you name it, just about every business. Fred Perpall, who is the CEO of our city's largest construction company, Beck, was my emissary, and we would pull together businesses. We would listen to them. We would listen to their workers. Doctors would be on the call, and then we would come up with reasonable ways to keep working and keep safe and keep our economy open while protecting those employees. And so it's a close relationship, and we're able to work together. I don't think anyone, writ large, any one group of people is likely to, be fined, because I think for most people, it's probably a welcome thing that for the people who don't like the mask, you can blame Judge Jenkins. For the people that do like the mask, you can say, well, I'm doing this to protect you because I care about you as a customer or employee. So, when we look at child care centers, for instance, child care centers care about our kids. They're going to do their best to follow this. It may be you've got a kid throwing the mask off, having a screaming tantrum, and they're doing their best. But at any snapshot in time, not every child has their mask on because of this tantrum or because of a asthma attack or something. But I think you can have faith in our child care centers, our pre-Ks, and our schools to do what's best for kids. And it helps them to have this because, unfortunately, others, not the schools, not the parents, but others, in our case, Governor Abbott and, some people in his political party and following President Trump have politicized this masking, public health, and vaccination when there really is no politics here. The virus doesn't care what your politics are, what your political party is, how you feel about any issue. The virus is just it's a virus, and the way all viruses work is they look for people to infect. If they run into a resistance because of immunity from the past virus or because of a new vaccine, they look for ways to survive by finding ways around that. So this is team public health, and there shouldn't be any of that, politics or disagreement, but there is. So this helps those folks who just want to help kids get back to helping and nurturing kids. Any other? I think that's it for the chat box, and if I can figure out how to use my computer, look through it one more time, we may have covered all the questions.
Judge, I had a question. It's Meredith Yeomans with NBC5. I just wondered if you have considered what thresholds must be met to rescind this executive order.
Yeah, Meredith, so that's a great question. I was asked that by some business leaders today, and I asked that of the doctors yesterday. And it's a fast evolving situation. So we don't have some number on a chart that I can point to and say, here's when you don't need to wear, a mask indoors. What we know is that the CDC is telling us that in areas of high spread, and they have a map, and all of North Texas is in it, you need to wear a mask indoors. We are finding out new and unfortunately not good things about the Delta variant, and we have another variant coming on the heels of that one. This won't be our last variant. So as our enemy advances, we too will have to make allowances and changes. It's the hope that more and more people will get vaccinated, and that for a time people will wear the mask. The numbers will turn as they did before, and with that, with more vaccination particularly, comes a better outlook for everyone and more freedom. Any other?
Yes, I have a question, Judge.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, in the previous orders, there were some capacity limits. Why there were not capacity limits considered at this point, given the aggressiveness of the Delta variant? So
everything is being considered. The doctors and I are looking at this daily, but this is where we are right now. That you may see more orders, you may see changes in that, but we're looking at this daily. We're trying to respond to it. Largely, we are where we are because the CDC, that has the most scientists looking at this, is where they are on what they're recommending. If you're like me, you may not know how to use the raise the hand function. So if anybody has them, and I give anybody a chance to ask any questions. Again, there are also lawyers here. If you want to ask the lawyers a question, or if you want to ask Melissa a question before we sign off. Anyone else?
Judge, there's a question from Bethany Erickson. If one of the lawyers can explain what happens if Abbott is successful in getting the TRO overturned and then that appeal is appealed, et cetera, could this be a mask on, mask off situation?
Dale or one of the lawyers want to take that?
I'll take a whack at it, Judge Jenkins.
Sorry, Doug.
Yeah, it's a great question. And what happens now is the case is set for a temporary injunction hearing on August 24. And depending on what happens there, whoever is unsuccessful would have the right to appeal to the Dallas Court of Appeals. Then ultimately that would go to the Texas Supreme Court. So I think in that situation, yes, it could be a mask on, mask off situation, depending on the outcomes, unfortunately. But unless anybody else on my team, the appellate team, thinks differently, I think that's the correct answer.
I'll say something, not about that. I think that's a great legal explanation. I have nothing to add. But I will say this. I was on a call with school superintendents this morning, and someone made the point of, well, we're going to get into a deal where the kids are told to wear the mask one day and then told they don't have to wear the mask, 3 days or 3 weeks later. And before I could answer, another superintendent said, so what? These are kids. They're going to do what we ask them to do. If they're told that they're required to wear a mask for the rest of August and September, and then in October, they're told they can wear it if they want to, they'll adopt it to that. And then Michael Hinojosa pointed out that they've had a mask mandate in place now for however many days, 2 or 3 days. And everyone's done it. They hadn't had one single incident where they've had a confrontation at a campus over a mask. And I think that's how the schools play out. And then I think also it's probably how businesses play out. People may not like it, but they'll do it. I don't like it. I don't like in the heat of Texas having to wear a mask on my face. But on the other hand, I much more don't like the possibility of getting COVID or spreading it to others, even though I'm vaccinated and would have a very mild case. One of my friends who's on this call had a breakthrough case, and it still knocks you down for 2 or 3 days. And then there's the danger of spreading it to other people. And so when you think about the mask, it's a small price to pay to protect our children and public health. And I've said again, I respect everyone, including people who believe that masks are abridgment of their personal rights. But I just, want to remind the public that in times of war, and that's what we're in, we are in a war, all of us, not with each other, but with a virus that has claimed over 600,000 Americans and, a lot more people worldwide. And it's coming back with a vengeance, and it's up to us to get together and win this battle so we can win this war. And in a time of a war, where would we be, for instance, when London was being bombed, if Winston Churchill had said, when the planes come over, we need you to turn your lights off and go to the shelter if you feel like it. But for those of you that have important work, leave your lights on. Expose all the rest of us to harm because I care about your personal freedom. Of course, that would not happen. Your personal freedom is very important to me and to everyone, but your personal freedom does not extend to hurting your neighbors, particularly in a time of a public health disaster like this. Think of it like a war, and we all need to do our part. And surely as Americans, we can hearken back to the great sacrifices, sacrifice enough to wear a mask when we go to the grocery store.
Judge Jenkins, the only thing that I would add to what Mr. Alexander said about the appellate process and the mask on off question is that the appellate process, as he described, will take a certain amount of time to go through the courts and for them to give it their thoughtful consideration. And to the extent that people have their own lives saved or the lives of loved ones saved by having the mask on during the on period, I think that is the real point of what you're doing here. And to the extent that the masks come off after a period of time where lives have been saved, I think we would all say it's been worth it.
Right.
And to be clear, so it was the 24th of August was the next hearing. So we're looking at least at potentially 13 days here where the masks are definitely going to be on before it could get in front of a court and potentially be overruled.
Assuming that there's not some extraordinary relief granted between those times, then that would be true.
Bouncing off of Alex, I think I'm asking the same question too. So you guys are not anticipating any legal interference until that next court date. Is that what you're anticipating?
Well, I would put it in this way. We're always hope for the best, prepare for the worst. If things proceed as they normally should, nothing should happen between now and August 24. But in the world of law and appeals, we never say never.
Any last, when we take, if anybody has them, a couple more questions. Probably not surprising to any of you who know me, but I've got call after call after call after this, with groups to get their support and answer their questions about this. So let's take two more. The first person that gets my attention. So anybody got any?
Judge Jenkins, This is Charles. I would like to say this. I got the Delta variant after being fully vaccinated. And I have no doubt that but for the vaccination, I would have been in the hospital. I was really, really sick. And when you called me and asked me if I would agree to represent you in this mission, I didn't hesitate because I totally believe we are saving lives. So I want you to know that I so respect the stand that you have taken. It's not sometimes politically expedient, but it was the right thing to do for the people. And I am honored to represent you.
Well, thank you so much, Charla. I appreciate that very much. And thank you and all the lawyers here for the great work that you've done. I know that but for the great work that you've done, people would have gotten sick. Some of them would have died. We would have run out of hospital space. That may still, unfortunately, happen. We are in a very grave situation. I don't want the public to think, oh, this has happened, and now if I wear a mask, everything will be okay, because that's just not true. We've got to, we can't all do everything, but we can all do something. And at a time like this, we've got to do all that we can. So if you've got a loved one who's unvaccinated, I need you to talk to them. And people don't respond to being condescending. They don't respond to people talking over them. They don't respond to being attacked. But they do respond to people that they love, that they respect, that they're maybe related to or work with, talking to them and saying things like, I care about you and I want to understand your concerns and why you aren't getting the vaccine. And then, answering those questions that people may have. They may say, well, I want to wait until others get it. And you can point out how many have already gotten it. Or I heard that it causes whatever they heard. And you can look it up and get them the information from even WebMD or a local site, a local doctor, what is the actual information? Because if every vaccinated person got an unvaccinated person to get vaccinated, this would be over, right?
That's why I posted on social media about me contracting the Delta variant, because I thought if it affected just one person, if just one person would get vaccinated because of that, then it's worth it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you, Charla, for I'm not going to release people's health information, but I appreciate you, sharing that. Any last question before we hop off?
Judge, here Imelda Garcia from Aldia. I have a question for you. Sure. Does this commercial entity concept includes any private company? I mean, businesses or offices, or yes. Is it just for business that receive clients and visitors?
So it includes. Let me read it out exactly so that I'm not paraphrasing it, but give me just 1 second, Imelda. So it is all commercial entities in Dallas County providing goods or services directly to the public. So, to use a hypothetical, would that include a lawyer's office? Well, yes, a lawyer's office provides goods and services to the public. Well, with that, obviously it includes a store, but it includes much more than just stores. It's all commercial entities that provide goods and services to the public. And that is all there in the order for people. And by the way, if you have questions about this, if you're watching this on Facebook Live and you've got a company, you have questions about this, I don't know that we have the staff to get everybody's question answered, but you can email me at dcjudge@dallascounty.gov. .org. That's D for Dallas and C for County Judge at dallascounty.org, and we'll try to get that answered. We've got me and others trying to look at those. And if you, for instance, are a retailer, I know the retailers are putting out some guidance on this, or restaurateur. The Restaurant Association already has guidance on this called something about a promise, the restaurateur's promise. That is the guidance on this. Similarly, other trade associations have guidance on this, so you can also go to your trade association for guidance on this as well. Thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you to the public that joined us on Facebook Live. I'm hopeful that we will turn the tide somewhat with these orders. And, that's the goal. It's not any person versus any other person. It's all of us, Team Public Health versus the virus. Thank you all so much. Take care.